Fantasy Football Podcast on trade deadline day. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. We are brought to you by Dabble, by Draft Battle, and by Chalkboard. Got a lot going on here, Nick. It is trade deadline day, and for once, we got some big trades. Some first-round picks getting dealt for players that are big names.
Mm-hmm.
Off with the Jets, who shocked. I think they shocked everybody by fully steering into the rebuild. I know they were rumored to trade some players, but I don't think Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams were on my list of guys that I expected to be dealt today.
You know, we had heard some rumors about Quinnen Williams specifically. Maybe that's just me having a very Jacksonville Jaguars tailored Twitter feed where, you know, that link has been made for a few weeks now. And, you know, there are reports out there that teams have been calling on Quinnen Williams. The price was too high. And ultimately, of course, they deal him to the Dallas Cowboys, who we'll get to their side of the equation, which I think is an interesting one. Yeah. But it's a full-on fire sale right now for the New York Jets. We are yet to see Breece Hall on the move, but you do wonder if that could happen before the deadline. We're recording this at about 2:30 p.m. Eastern, so roughly 90 minutes until that deadline. We'll, of course, keep you posted if anything breaks throughout the show. But, you know, I think it's kind of the right move for the Jets. You know, it's brutal to lose the two faces of that defense. You know, you really don't have a whole lot in terms of like, all right, who's the future of this team? You know, really I guess it's Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams, and Sauce Gardner. Those are kind of your big four. And now two of those guys on the same side of the ball are out of the window. You know, I like the aggression from the Indianapolis Colts, certainly sensing an opportunity. This season has gone much better than they ever could have expected, than anybody I think expected so far. To me, they are clearly the best team in their division. You know, this really cements that, bringing in Sauce Gardner, kind of shoring up that one area, which was the secondary, the pass defense that had been a little bit shaky. You know, you got Charvarius Ward on IR. Yeah. You had to pay a price to do it. But if you're the New York Jets now, you have just a ton of draft capital in 2026, in 2027. That 27 class in particular is projected to be really strong. You know, the rub is that you now have to convert on those picks. You're probably taking a quarterback in one of those drafts, and we know how that's gone for the New York Jets. So that's always going to be a little bit dubious. But for a team that has one win, for a team that was already kind of unintentionally tanking this season, I think they made the right move. I think this was a core that really was not going anywhere in the short term.
No, I agree. It's just it's more than just the short term too. They realize next year's probably sunk too. They don't have their quarterback for the future. Or they barely have a quarterback for the present. It all starts and ends there. And if you don't have that, you can't expect to contend elsewhere. I mean, yes, the Colts were able to retool on the fly with Daniel Jones, but they have a better core around. Where the Jets, I mean, just look at it. They have Garrett Wilson at wide receiver and ... And we knew that coming into the season. So not a surprise that they kind of go. And the way the season's gone so poorly, it's not a surprise. I mean, they've now added 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick, 2 players that they can take a stab at too, in A.D. Mitchell and Mazi Smith, especially the A.D. Mitchell part. I mean, I like them taking a chance on that as well. I mean, why not? You know, take a flyer there. When your number 2 is Tyler Johnson, Arian Smith, you know, why not? Yeah. Alan Lazard, you know, whoever you want to say is the Jets number 2. It's not that good.
No, it is not. It's probably whoever that man is probably the worst number 2 in the NFL. I like just taking the chance on A.D. Mitchell just to throw in, you know, a guy who got off to a rocky start as a rookie with the Colts. You had hoped maybe he could take a step forward this season. And really the only positive thing we saw out of him were a couple big plays in that Rams game. And then he undid all that, dropping the touchdown or dropping the ball before crossing the goal line, having the big hold, an unnecessary hold that brought back a touchdown. And since then, he's played like 20 snaps over the last month. So I think the Colts were just done with him.
Yeah,
we'll cross him off, call it a bust of a second-round pick. But the talent is there. A lot of people liked A.D. Mitchell coming out of Texas. I would be hesitant to say that there's like immediate fantasy value here. Like it's a huge jump up in terms of opportunity. Literally playing for any other team but the team that had thrown you in the doghouse is a plus for A.D. Mitchell. It's just a shame that the greener pastures have to be the New York Jets.
Right. It's been trouble growing weeds, let alone any flowers, anything else to bloom. So that it's a pretty barren pasture. That's the problem. So yeah, I'm interested to see what else happens. What other receivers get dealt. Obviously that's not the guy we're focusing on. He was the throw in there, but hey, interesting stuff there. The Jets also turned around and traded Quinnen Williams to the Cowboys. Jerry Jones said he had trades in the bag. He was going to release them. And we go, oh, okay, Logan Wilson. Oh, you did it again, Jerry. Oh, ho, ho. All in Jerry Jones. But then he turns around and deals a first-round pick, which is Dallas's own, and a second-round pick instead of the Packers' first-round pick. That's why I say Dallas's own. To go get Quinnen Williams. Big trade there. But my question is it too late? I mean, they're going into the bye sitting at 5-1. A desultory loss on Monday night. In a hyper competitive NFC, that's pretty tough.
Yeah. First of all, I did see a report that it's essentially a conditional first, as far as whichever is the better pick of Green Bay or Dallas will go to the Jets. That will likely be the Dallas pick, regardless. But also a note here from our guy Connor Hughes for SNY said that the Jets do have offers on the table right now for both Jermaine Johnson and Breece Hall. So we could see an even larger fire sale coming over the next hour or so for the Jets. You bring up the exact point that I'm thinking of here with Dallas, and maybe this is more of a long-term play with Quinnen Williams, who certainly has plenty of good years ahead of him. But based on what we saw from this Cowboys team last night, it's like, is this season really salvageable? You have so much ground to make up already in the NFC. Like, how many of these teams ahead of you right now do you really feel good about passing up? I mean, the Cowboys are 3-5. You probably need to get to 10 wins at a bare minimum. So can you go 7-2 the rest of the way? I don't know that I would say I would expect that team to do that. It's like there are 3 teams in the NFC West alone that look better on paper than the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys to me are almost closer to like a Bears type of team, where it's like, they're probably capable of beating just about anyone, maybe not the elite teams on a good week. They could still lose to just about anyone. Like that game last night against the Cardinals, like really, really strong defensive effort from Arizona. Another solid game from Jacoby Brissett. But you watch this Dallas team and it's like, Quinnen Williams absolutely helps, but they sack Brissett 5 times. Like the pass rush was not really the problem for Dallas. And this helps you against the run too. I get all that. They made the Logan Wilson addition. I just think it is probably a little bit too late to salvage this season.
Yeah. It's ironic that the defense started playing better in the fourth quarter after being miserable for about 2/3 of the game. Maybe late third quarters when they started dialing it up there a little bit there. And yet, like the one thing that I think is their weakest spot is their secondary, which they haven't improved. They're really counting on the front 7 to kind of cover up their weaknesses in the secondary. Now there's time. It's also ironic that, as soon as they get the defense fixed a little bit, the offense falls apart. And really it fell apart all game. They couldn't, the Terrence Steele issue there at right tackle. He came into the game with a migraine and he got pulled shortly into that game. And Dak was just getting swamped from his right. Yeah. But it's still, it's Arizona. It's still like, okay, fine. You should have some sort of adjustment to it. And they didn't. They only scored 10 offensive points in this game. Yeah. Really, really surprised considering what a machine they had been at home in the 3 previous games.
Yeah. And I misspoke, by the way, on the Cowboys record. I keep just like mentally blacking out the tie. They are 3-5-1. They are not 3-5, which is not a whole lot better as far as, you're facing an uphill battle the rest of the way. But I think they're just counting on hopefully getting healthier in the secondary. And again, I think I look at this as more of a 2026 and beyond type of move for Dallas. Obviously Jerry Jones is always going to try to find a way to keep his team in the mix, both headlines wise and real life wise, even when they are 3-5-1. But they've dug themselves too big of a hole. And I was really disappointed, if we want to just talk about that game a little bit last night in the Cowboys offense. Again, it was a really strong defensive effort from Arizona, not just getting pressure on Dak Prescott, but also, we had 3 or 4 times where Dak would escape. It looked like there's a big play downfield. And then, you had defensive backs coming in, making plays on the ball. I think it was one of the announcers, kind of got on CeeDee Lamb a little bit for not coming back to the ball, not getting the hands out there. Arizona just looked like the better team, looked like the more physical team from the jump. But as soon as Dallas failed on that 4th down on the first drive, you started to get a little nervous because they had moved it so well until they got into the red zone.
There was, I tweeted something to that effect, that if great start if you were on the under, especially a great start if you were on the Cowboys under, which I was not. I was the opposite of that. Yeah. And, that sequence happened. Arizona gets that drive, but then settles for a field goal. It's just like, Just you could just see it coming like, oh man, it would have been better if that one tip pass by Dak early on would have been picked off. Maybe then we would have had a quick series at least, so we get the ball back. It's like that. That's the way my mind was working in that game. So I just kind of like, oh yeah, this is a worst case scenario. And of course, I have a lot of Dallas offensive players in my teams. Who doesn't? I have Dak, I have Lamb, I have Ferguson in some teams. Ferguson low key is kind of terrible. His fantasy production has been good, but the fumble was really bad. The drop pass. That you can't have that. They still scored on that drive, I think, but still, you got to catch that. Dak made a great play to get that ball out under pressure, and Ferguson just dropped it, kind of batted it down. Yeah. So it was just a lot of bad plays by him. He's had a couple of drops this season that have been pretty bad.
Yeah, this game almost reminded me a little, and I know this is a stretch, of like Buffalo KC, where it's like even when Dallas was moving it, it just felt like it took so much effort, these kind of Herculean plays down the field just to convert these second and third and longs that they found themselves in throughout the entire game. Still found a way to make this, a game late into the fourth quarter. But you never really felt like Arizona was going to let it slip away. And really, I mean, both of these teams, Arizona 3-5, Dallas 3-5-1. We could talk about the quarterback controversy if there is one right now in Arizona, and I think there kind of is now that Jakobi Brissett has actually won a game. I think it was gonna be hard to make that move. Even with Brissett playing well, if they didn't have win-loss results to show for it. But we are now trending toward a really interesting decision, I think, for Arizona. I will say I will be surprised if they go away from Kyler Murray. I think you are just opening up a Pandora's box of PR nightmares if you stick with Jakobi Brissett. I think at that point you're kind of admitting defeat on Kyler Murray. You might have to trade Kyler Murray. I don't know if Arizona is interested in doing that. So I do think they go back to Kyler, partially because I don't know that salvaging a playoff berth is possible for this team. Even if deep down they believe Jakobi Brissett is the better option. One, he's like 32, 33 years old. He's probably not, your franchise guy going forward, especially with Kyler on that massive contract. And two, you had just lost 5 in a row. You're 3-5. So like, I don't really understand the upside of going with Brissett right now. Because if you do that, you're basically burning that bridge with Kyler Murray.
Yeah. I was just gonna say the only reason that you could say it is if they're on the cusp of making the playoffs. And I don't know if that they are because of that 5-game losing streak. I think their roster is getting better. I think this is a young team still. I think they've got their coaching staff in place. I think Gannon's actually okay. Sideline temper tantrum notwithstanding, where he had to go apologize for and all that. I don't think he's on the hot seat, but at the same time, they have to kind of figure that out. And, it's tough to sell veteran players that you're giving up on this season. If you're going to go, I think if you do go back to Kyler, then I think you should steer into it. Trade Budda Baker, trade, the people, because that means you're not going to be going for it this year. That's the way I look at it. But because Brissett clearly has been better. He has been a better offensive player. He's made the offense better. They've been better around him. I know that my leagues where I have McBride, where I have Marvin Harrison Jr., I want Brissett to be the quarterback, but the points you make are right. It is kind of a point of no return. You can fudge it this week by saying, oh, he's fully not recovered from that foot injury. That's a way to get around it for another week, but you're only buying time.
Yeah, and it is also the Dallas Cowboys defense, and that has to be part of the equation. It's like I would like to think that Kyler Murray would have been able to move the ball pretty effectively on this defense. Now, does Kyler keep you hanging around in those games against Green Bay and Indy, which Arizona had a chance to win both of them? I don't know. We'll never know. But Dallas, it's not quite Cincinnati level, Jeff, but it's close. They're basically second to last in all the key defensive categories behind the Bengals now. So I think that's a big part of it as well. No major trades, by the way, have broken during this discussion, but I do want to go back to the two receivers that we've seen dealt in Rashid Shaheed and Jakobi Meyers. Let's start with Meyers. Let's go to Jacksonville. A lot going on with this receiver group right now. Travis Hunter, of course, out indefinitely. There was almost kind of a throwaway tweet from Rappaport this morning when he was talking about the Meyers deal, saying that, internally the Jags think that Travis Hunter could be back in 3 weeks. That's a lot more optimistic, than I had heard. And that would be great for Jacksonville. I was kind of preparing for this to potentially be season ending. But either way, in addition to Travis Hunter, you had Brian Thomas go down at the end of that Raiders game. De'Ami Brown has been really banged up all season. He got hurt again. Tim Patrick didn't play last week. So we had some Parker Washington optimism really by default. some cold water being thrown on that now with Meyers arriving in Jacksonville.
Yeah, a little bit, but I don't expect Thomas to play this week. Brian Thomas Jr. to play this week. Thomas has a low grade, high ankle sprain, and we've seen players come back immediately from that. Notably, I think Justin Herbert was the one that I first heard that terminology being used last year. Herbert was severely compromised when he came back from that. And a wide receiver, obviously, mobility is how you make how you make what you do. And it's how you apply your trade. I wouldn't be surprised if he has to sit a week. I know it's a big game against Houston. They're currently a wild card team. I get that. I think Washington's still a useful ad for this week. I just hate the matchup against Houston at Houston. I think that's the part that gets me a little concerned, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, I kind of am like, I think Washington could get 8 to 10 targets this week. And if he gets 8 to 10 targets, that's going to have some currency.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect Jacksonville to be able to run the ball very effectively on Houston. And it's just, the Texans are just a bad fantasy matchup for everybody. Even if we don't see CJ Stroud, like that doesn't really change things for me. That just kind of means this is going to be even more of a mucked up type of game. Davis Mills came on and wasn't good, but he wasn't a total disaster last week against a much better defense in the Denver Broncos. But you just look at, the raw fantasy points allowed to some of these key positions. Houston, fewest fantasy points allowed this season to quarterbacks, 15.2 points per game. And they are 30th or third best, however you want to look at that in terms of limiting wide receiver fantasy points, 26 fantasy points per game allowed to receivers in total. And after that, I believe the Jags play the Chargers. So that's another defense that has been really, really good in terms of limiting fantasy points. They're actually better against the wide receiver position than Houston is, and right there in terms of limiting quarterbacks. So 2 of probably the 5 defenses that you don't want to face right now in fantasy coming up on that schedule.
Exactly. So that does make it tough. Question from Uncle Ted. You are our man, all things Duval. Brenton Strange, is he coming back soon?
He's eligible to come back in week 11. I have not heard anything as far as whether or not that will actually be the date that he's back, but week 11 is when he can return. They need him, that's for sure. Going down to Hunter Long, and I think they have like Johnny Munt or somebody like that as their third tight end. There's a huge drop off there. He's not Tucker Kraft. It's not that level of impact, but kind of felt like a junior version of him as far as somebody that, I think if he had stayed healthy this year, we would maybe view in a completely different light for fantasy heading into next year. So that's going to be huge. And that will actually be, I think, a really underrated piece in determining, do the Jaguars actually make the playoffs as a wild card team? It's can Brian Thomas, get back healthy, and can he actually look like himself at some point down the stretch? And, do they get Brenton Strange back in time for him to be that safety blanket that he was for Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, that would be huge too. It kind of gets them as a functioning offense there. Buys them time for Travis Hunter too. I like that aspect of it there. When Hunter comes back, is he going to be just a one-way player, or is he going to go back to being a two-way player right away?
I think it'll be more one-sided than it had been. And we already saw that trending more toward offense in recent weeks, 79, 87% offensive snap share for him in his last 2 games. The injury came at a really tough time, coming off of easily his best game on the offensive end in that London game against the Rams. At the same time, the touchdown came when they were down 4 scores. A lot of that came in garbage time. I would like to see some more downfield usage from Travis Hunter, which we did see in that Rams game, but really, for the first half of the season, on balance, it's a lot of short passes, quick screens, make a guy miss. And he's been really good at that. But we haven't really seen a huge sample of him being used as like a true downfield threat. And I do wonder how the Meyers addition kind of impacts him when he comes back. Like I think some of the luster has been rubbed off that, partially due to the injury and partially due to the Meyers addition. Like just bringing in a, in my opinion, kind of a rock solid number 2 NFL wide receiver, it's going to downgrade everybody in that Jags receiving room.
Agreed. I agree. It absolutely will. All right, let's talk about the other wide receiver trade. Rashid Shaheed going to the Seahawks for 4th and 6th round picks. Slightly better return than they gave up for Devon Bailey, excuse me. But not much better. And Shaheed's a better player. I thought they gave up a pretty good player in this one here. His role in Seattle, we saw Torrey Horton kind of advance a little bit there. What do we see out of Shaheed going to Seattle now?
Yeah, Shaheed is a better player than Vele. He's also somehow younger than Devon Vele, who came in as an older guy. So that's something to keep an eye on. I really like what Seattle and the Colts have done today, which is, teams that are trending in the right direction right now that are probably maybe even a little bit better than they thought they would be. That's especially the case for the Colts this season, and doubling down on that, not being complacent, sitting as 2-3 loss teams right now. And it wasn't like a glaring need necessarily for Seattle. I think if they had stood pat, you wouldn't have fans clamoring, why do we not add Rashid Shaheed? But I think it's just a recognition that you have an arms race going on in the NFC, and especially in the NFC West. And if you want to really feel good about your chances to, win a playoff game against the Packers or the Lions or the Rams or whoever it may be, it's like you want as many pieces as you can. And this offense has already been just so efficient, especially that passing game with Sam Darnold. And this now gives you, one of the better take the top off guys in the NFL. Unfortunately, much like the Jakobi Meyers edition in Jacksonville, it's great in real life for both of these teams. It's a little bit frustrating for fantasy. It's like Shaheed is in a much better situation. Myers is probably in a better situation with the Jags, but things are a little bit muddled now. Like this definitely stifles the Torrey Horton second half breakout that I was looking forward to. We'll see where this leaves Cooper Kupp. There's already been some whispers that this could be a multi-week injury for him. He, of course, didn't play against Washington the other night, so maybe that's a little bit of the thinking. We don't trust Cooper Kupp to stay healthy down the stretch. So I love both of those additions in real life, but I don't know if this is like a massive fantasy upgrade for anyone. It's probably an upgrade for Shaheed, I guess, because he wasn't the number one guy in New Orleans, and now you're just in a vastly better system.
Right. I mean, let's face it. I mean, these are necessarily muddled. Almost always these trades work out that way. Very rarely do you have it stepping into a great situation. And, it's just the way it happens there, where there's a vacancy and a great situation. If more often than not, you're either stepping into a terrible situation or you're stepping into a muddled situation. So, I still like, though, that it's a better quarterback, better team, better offense. I think with less volume, Shaheed can get decent production because of the big plays. Horton's the guy that gets hurt by this one here for sure. I still think Horton's good for this week, maybe against Arizona, because it might take Shaheed a while to get there to get that production. But long term, it definitely quells my enthusiasm for Torrey Horton. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I still think Torrey Horton can still be a dude for this team. It's probably just, we're not getting like a true second half breakout. And he always kind of needed, the Cooper Kupp injury to really step into that role. The target volume hasn't really been all that high. He's just been really efficient and, really, kind of red zone friendly with those targets. So, some of that might've just kind of been wish casting by the fantasy community in general. But overall, I like this upgrade quite a bit for Seattle.
Yeah, I do too. All right, that's going to bring us to our first break, where we talk about some of our good sponsors here. We got a new sponsor from Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big. You can win up to 5,000x your money this football season. Starting with Dabble is easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. Big thanks to Dabble for joining us. Nick, we had one other trade I wanted to talk about real quick. The Eagles went and traded for Jaelan Phillips. They get him for a third-round pick. They had 2 third-round picks. Ironically, one of those was from the Jets from last year from the deal there where which pass rusher was it? Bear with me. Now on the Bucks. God, I had it in my brain and then I lost it. But I hate it.
Is that Reddick?
Yes, Hassan Reddick deal. Where Reddick then chose not to play for the Jets for a long time too, because he wasn't getting the deal from the Jets either that he wanted to get from the Eagles in the first place. So the Eagles get to kind of build up their pass rush a little bit more. They also got Jair Alexander earlier to try to give him another option at second corner. I'm not sure it's a good option, but it is an option. And the Eagles are no strangers to trading. I mean, they wheel and deal all the time. That's what they do. I like this addition of Phillips. I think he is a good outside pass rusher. Obviously, they needed a little bit of help. They had some free agent defections. They tried to go, with a couple of different options that haven't worked out so far, including one player retiring on them. So here we are. And they go out and get Jaelan Phillips. Who I like. I think it's a pretty reasonable stab.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a reasonable price. He's not a Quinnen Williams, Micah Parsons type of player, of course, but I think you're still getting an impact guy and not sacrificing too much draft capital. I think the rest of the league is probably breathing like a sigh of relief right now, because you're always just worried that the Eagles are going to be the team that's willing to push the chips in, maybe slightly overpay to maximize the short term, and they've cashed in on a number of those deals.
Yep.
Over the last couple of years. There were some Myles Garrett whispers earlier this month about would they be willing to do that and really beef up this defense. But yeah, I think that and bringing in Alexander, it's like these are the exact type of deals that this version of the Eagles are comfortable making. I don't expect Jair Alexander to make much of an impact. I think Baltimore really needed him, and the fact that he either couldn't get healthy or just couldn't play well enough to even be active for the Ravens, like at the height of their injury issues, says a lot. Philly is kind of one of those teams that you give the benefit of the doubt for a reclamation project. Like if it can't work in Philly with that coaching staff and that surrounding talent, then maybe Jair Alexander is just cooked. But I don't know. This kind of reminds me of like, teams bringing in like a Markelle Fultz in the NBA, and it's like, oh, hey, Markelle Fultz, he used to be really good. He was the #1 pick. Yeah. And it just doesn't work out. Like there are certain guys that just, whether it's injury or whatever, decline, they just kind of reach a point where they're not playable. And I don't view Jair Alexander as, a piece that is sending other teams shuddering in the NFC, but the Jaelan Phillips edition matters. I mean, I'm looking at the Pro Football Reference numbers right now. Eagles are in the bottom half of the league in terms of pressure rate. They have 16 sacks on the year. That's bottom 10. I mean, 2 a game so far. It's not really what you're used to from Philly.
No, and they're entering a stretch of their schedule too. They go and face the Packers this week here. They need that. They need the to step up right away and provide that. And pass rushers, they can do that. They don't need a whole lot of time to acclimate. As opposed to say like a wide receiver, which has to learn all the plays. Usually see them getting slow rolled into the team's offense a little bit there. They also added Tank Bigsby, which we kind of mocked earlier, and then he had a big game against the Giants last time out too. So, and we'll see about Saquon. Expect him to be full go for this game coming off the bye week, but you never know. So,
yeah, I mean that report was from like a week ago at this point,
exactly.
Right? And that was he said he believes he'll be available coming out of the bye. So no information yet. They play Monday night, of course. But yeah, I would not be totally shocked if Saquon is still either limited or misses this game. We're same boat with Quinshon Judkins for the Browns. It's a very, very tough week for running backs on the waiver wire. Nothing very we've tough. Seen at the deadline has really changed that, assuming Breece Hall is not dealt. And, you're kind of grasping at straws. You're looking at some handcuff options. And look, if the deadline passes and we don't have like a Tony Pollard trade, a Breece Hall trade, nothing's really going to change on that front. So I think, if you're in need of a running back, you're almost kind of hoping that, maybe you could get a free week out of Tank Bigsby or someone like Dylan Sampson.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people were picking up Tank Bigsby last week. A lot of people were picking up Dylan Sampson, maybe not as many because, the upside is lesser, but maybe not now. And maybe that now that the Jets have traded away Williams and Sauce, that has whole changed. I haven't checked I haven't looked in the last hour to see what the line shift has been.
Big move. Browns are road favorites. 2.5 now is the number.
What's the total? That's the thing I'm curious about.
That has stuck. That is stuck at 37.5.
That doesn't track. It's kind of funny. If the Browns are supposed to all of a sudden score more, I mean, it's not like the Jets have traded away offensive players just yet, but we'll see about Breece Hall. But
I think it's just an overall lack of faith in the Jets offense against the
sure.
Browns defense. And I mean, maybe the Browns do score a little bit more. That total should probably be slightly higher, but it's still Dylan Gabriel. And, the Browns could trade Njoku. We'll see on that. That's a really tough game to pick. I don't know. If you're the Jets, I mean, your season was already over, but is this like more of a hit to the locker room? How do you react to this if you're Aaron Glenn, if you're other players on that defense? The fight had probably already been lost, but it's like, all right, now we got to play the rest of our season without our only 2 good defensive players.
Right. I saw Breece Hall had a tweet that strongly suggested he wanted out. I didn't see the actual tweet in question. I saw talk of said tweet, so that's like third-hand information. But yeah, that would be representative. I would think of the remaining better players on the Jets. It's like, why am I here? Someone's got to stick around. Someone's going to be what they build around. And Hall was already a thought about being traded anyhow. Because why wouldn't you trade a running back in his 4th year if you're the Jets? I mean, that makes one that's been hurt before too. I think that he's an obvious trade. I saw that the Jets are wanting a 3rd round pick for him. We'll see if they get it. I'd like to see him land somewhere good. That's somewhere.
Yeah.
That's a player there that I think could step in pretty quickly if he lands in the right situation. Could you picture him on the Chargers, for instance? I mean,
Chargers,
with the news
the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Both of those teams came to mind for me. New England, is reportedly in the running back market despite drafting Travion Henderson.
Not New England. Please, not New England. That's the one place I don't want him going.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean if I have Hall in some play. Because but like the news on Hampton is he's not going to be back for at least a couple more games.
Right.
Until at least week 12, they're saying maybe. And then, the Chiefs are obviously on bye this week. Pacheco has been okay at times, but also has an MCL sprain. I mean, I think that's a natural step in right there. I actually, I think Hall would maybe struggled a little bit to find all the reps in KC just because they have so many other options. So I think the Chargers is where I want him to land if I have Breece Hall in my fantasy teams.
Yeah, I still worry about, Hampton will be back at some point. You spent a 1st round pick on Hampton, then you're giving up more draft capital to bring in a guy who might be a rental for half the season. Like I get it. I mean, it would be awesome in the short term for fantasy. I can see why the Chargers would be a little bit hesitant on that. I would love to see the Chiefs bring somebody in. I don't think it would be Breece Hall. Tony Pollard was kind of the guy that I was hoping for, maybe a little bit of a lower cost. Obviously, Tennessee should be selling off everybody right now because if we want to go back to week 9, there are a lot of things to talk about from that Bills-Chiefs game. One thing that really stuck out to me is still just the lack of explosion in the Chiefs running game against a pretty gettable Bills defense. Like they were running it okay, but there's a cap when Kareem Hunt is your number 1 back. And, Pacheco's a little more explosive, but still, not in that upper echelon by any means. And, Buffalo didn't even run it all that well in that game. But, the explosives that you can create with James Cook is just such a nice piece to have in your offense. And, I think, again, Kansas City can pick up 5-6 yards when they need to.
Yeah.
But not having anything close to a home run threat in the running game, I think is something that could hamper them.
I agree. And the Bills kind of dared the Chiefs to run against them and they couldn't. And meanwhile, Cook, they broke a long streak of non-100 yard games. Cook did against the Chiefs there too. I think it's like first time in 20 games or something of that nature. Forget the exact stat, but point is, that they were effective enough in the running game there. That's something that they can do and they will be doing going forward there. So one other note though, I mean, my desire for Hall to go to the Chiefs is tempered by the fact that Joe Alt is out for the season. That is a big loss.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, man. Stacking that on top of the Slater injury, Alt missing time earlier this season. It's brutal. You kind of wonder, does that limit the ultimate ceiling for the Chargers? Who I still think when the Chargers have looked good, they've looked as good as anybody. They've also been a little more prone to some of these no-show games, I think, than you would like. And, it's really tough for any team. I don't care who your quarterback is, who your coach is, how good your defense is. Losing both of your tackles, both of those guys being big timer, 1st round picks, franchise type of players, it's going to be very difficult to overcome.
Absolutely. We are brought to you by the folks over at Draft Battle and also a new sponsor this week. Weekly Draft Fantasy Football is here. Welcome to Draft Battle, the only fantasy football platform where the draft is king. What's the best part about playing fantasy football? The draft. So why do we only draft at the beginning of the season? At Draft Battle, you can enter snake draft contests every week, all season long. And the best part is you can get $100 bonus cash right now at sign up with promo code RotoWire. You heard that right. $100 bonus cash with promo code RotoWire. Draft Battle contests last 1 week only and have no season-long commitment. No salary caps. Better odds. 8 teams per contest with a best ball format, which means no roster management. Plus, super flex scoring and weekly payouts. Injuries derail your season-long league? Stay in the game all season long with Draft Battle. High stakes, weekly draft, fantasy football. Bonus cash is non-withdrawable. Must be 18 plus and present in select states. 19 plus in Nebraska. Visit draftbattle.com for details. In the office back in the day, we did do what we called death drafts. Me, Liss, Scott Pianowski, Tim Schuler. We would do these 1 week drafts, and we do, and we do it for one night of baseball too. We thought we were edgy there. And we're not, obviously we didn't invent the format, but I like this idea. I think this is a fun idea.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Implore everybody to check that out. You can find all the info in the episode description if you're listening in podcast form, or just scroll down a little bit if you're watching us on YouTube.
Indeed. All right, so we've hit most of the trade deadline stuff here, Nick. Let's empty the notebook. Talk about some of the things that move the needle for us. Jayden Daniels getting hurt is obviously a big one here. Fantasy wise, playoff race wise. I mean, it's everything. It really kind of ends the Commanders season basically, and fantasy seasons forces us to move on from him. A lot of stuff going on in this game.
Yeah, I think the Commander season was probably cooked even if Jayden Daniels didn't get hurt late in that game. But this officially cements it. In terms of fantasy fallout here, you kind of downgrade everybody in the Washington offense. Marcus Mariota is a capable backup. 3 starts this season. He's given you 13, 17, and 20 fantasy points. You're not rushing out to the waiver wire to grab Mariota in a standard 12-team league. If you're in a super flex league, starting quarterbacks for the rest of the season don't become available very often. So there is plenty of appeal there. I do wonder if this impacts when/if we see Terry McLaurin again this season. Unless he's 100%, do you bring him back? Could there be a shutdown? So that there could be some trickle down effects in this wide receiver room. There have been some Deebo Samuel trade rumors. We'll see if that gets done in the next 45 minutes. I would guess probably not. Either way, you're looking at Jalen Lane, you're looking at Chris Moore as some of these deeper league options. Jalen Lane was more involved this past week. Neither of those guys have really popped all that much, and it's hard to imagine that looking better with Marcus Mariota. And suddenly this is just an offense where I'm just not really interested in most of these pieces. Even the Bill hype has really subsided in the last month.
I have him in a couple leagues, and he's borderline unpayable. Maybe not even borderline. You saw Chris Rodriguez get a series and get the touchdown in that game. Jerry McNichols is getting past, getting the targets, because let's face it, Bill is not much of a pass catcher. And I don't know if he's a good pass blocker for that matter either. So yeah, it's a 3-headed monster on a very wimpy monster. It's tough. We might see Deebo get dealt. We might see some other guys get traded away from this team. We keep harping the case, oldest team in football, and it's by a good amount too. Which you wouldn't think because of the young quarterback. Ted kind of was Uncle Ted was talking about Jayden Daniels being RG3 2.0. I wanted to dismiss that, but there's some really scary parallels here. I mean, this is different. They're different players, but the injuries have kind of wrecked him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I think the style of play could be called into question. If we want to get into like turf quality in Landover, Maryland, we could do that, I suppose. But I don't know. I mean, should he have been out there at that point in the game? If you want to make that argument, I guess I'll listen to it. Dan Quinn kind of took ownership for that yesterday. But this was an elbow injury. It wasn't a torn ACL or anything like that. Just kind of bad luck, and another just brutal blow for what's just kind of been a disaster season from the start for Washington. But this could be a blessing in disguise as far as where that pick lands, because this team just needs so much help. They need to rebuild. Like you said, they are the oldest team in the NFL. They need to kind of refresh just about every position on this team. And, you don't have your 2nd round pick. You don't have your 4th round pick in this year's draft as part of the Laramie Tunsil trade. And that's really what kind of makes this frustrating, is like they really doubled down on being the oldest team. And they're like, you know what, we're bringing back, some of these older pieces. We're bringing in Deebo. We're bringing in Tunsil. We don't want to fall off year over year. And it just backfired on them, really not of their own doing.
Yeah. And dates back to last season when they traded for Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline. That one's blown up in their face badly. Yeah. He's out for the year this year after getting torched in the playoffs. And then, this year hasn't been much better. So that story's done. I hate seeing it, but they're in a bad spot, really bad spot right now. I thought the Vikings were similar to them. The Vikings saved their season, I think, with that win against Detroit. Big game coming up this week though, against the Ravens, another team. Both this isn't quite win or die, but it's not much worse than that though. It's not much better than that though. At the same time, very big game coming up.
A big game, and I think a tricky game now for Baltimore. Minnesota, I think, impressed me just about as much as anyone in Week 9. I mean, coming off of maybe their worst collective game in like 2 or 3 years, I thought, against the Chargers. Maybe if you get that pick six early on, things go differently, but probably not. I mean, they just got walked down the field on defense, couldn't do anything on offense. Carson Wentz is banged up. And, I was guilty of just dramatically underrating the impact of JJ McCarthy. I don't think he was great in this game, but he made the 3 or 4 throws that he absolutely had to make. The one to Jalen Naylor to seal up the game. That took a lot of faith, I think, in Kevin O'Connell. I think a lot of teams with essentially a rookie quarterback would have just run the ball there, burn some clock, make a burn a timeout, whatever, and then try to trust your defense. And instead, they said, no, we're not giving the ball back to Detroit. You got to make this throw, and he put it on the spot to Jalen Naylor. I will say, I mean, Detroit beat itself in this game. Bad special teams, the Montgomery fumble. They had a field goal blocked. 17 of Minnesota's 27 points did come on short field situations. So a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes for Detroit. They had 4 3-and-outs on the day. The big concern for me with the Lions right now, and I don't have that many. I still think they're a better team than Green Bay, top to bottom, but they only put up 305 yards as a team. Jared Goff was sacked 5 times. They're not running the ball well at all. I mean, they're like 20th in the NFL in EPA per rush. Like, we're just so used to this offense running as a well-oiled machine, seeing these big plays every week from Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, this is like 3 or 4 times now where Gibbs has just completely been shut down.
Yeah, and Montgomery's only had 2 good games also. Like, that's kind of the thing. Montgomery got a touchdown this past week, but he's not running efficiently. He had that massive game against the Ravens, and we kind of fooled ourselves there. We thought, okay, Detroit's back to being a wagon. There's no problems. They've figured out this interior offensive line. The coordinator change is working. It's fine. We're going to be all right. And since then, if you look, you kind of, Gibbs had a massive game in that Monday night game against Tampa Bay, but the rest of that game wasn't so great. Goff wasn't so good in that game. The pass rush got to him a little bit. I'm starting to think that, and maybe I should have gotten to this point sooner. Again, a Bengals game camouflages everything. Like you can run roughshod over the Bengals. It doesn't mean all your problems are solved. Same thing with the week 2 win over the Bears. They had a lot of good things that worked, but a lot of things that didn't quite work. And so, so that is a good point too. I also think that the Vikings did some things differently too. They got their interior, their pass rush was really working well. And their offensive line played a lot better in that game too. They had 4 of their 5 offensive linemen back, just missing their center still, which isn't something to dismiss, but they had more time to adjust to that life without them.
Yeah, they were healthier on the offensive line. They just played a more confident game, I thought. And Jared Goff, like the Lions offensive line has struggled a little bit as well. There was a next gen stat that was floating around this week. The Vikings had a 35.7% quick pressure rate in that game, the highest of any team in any game this season. It was the highest pressure rate the Lions have allowed in like 3 years. I mean, Jared Goff has been sacked 9 times in the last 2 games. So I think the running game is suffering because of the offensive line. Goff doesn't have time to throw. You're not used to so many quick 3-and-out type of drives that we saw from Detroit in that game. I still think the Lions are going to be fine. I still think the Vikings, if they lose this game to Baltimore, it's going to be an uphill battle the rest of the way. But I thought this was just a huge prove-it spot for McCarthy and Minnesota. Like, if McCarthy had come out and struggled and thrown 2 picks, it's like, oh my goodness. Like, so we're playing out the rest of the season with this guy. He's going to be hyper evaluated on every single snap, every single series, every game. I think he bought himself a little bit of time to develop with his performance. And, if Minnesota had come out flat and looked like they did against the Chargers, I think you start questioning O'Connell, you start questioning the way this team was built, the McCarthy pick. It was a huge inflection point game, I thought, for Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, the whole theory of the case is you drop into McCarthy on a very well-constructed roster, and all he has to do is not be bad. And the well-constructed roster part was kind of failing for a while there. Then again, it was being held up by Carson Wentz playing on a broken shoulder too. So, I mean, there is that too, but and the thing is that, this is McCarthy's rookie season basically, and rookies need time. He's played 3 games ever in the NFL. We got to remember that still, that's part of it there. On the Ravens side, it was a get right game for them, albeit against Miami. We got a grade on that particular curve. But they did get Lamar back. He made it through healthy. Henry had a 100-yard game for the first time in a while. It took some doing to get that there. Some fourth quarter runs that probably shouldn't have gone to him, but nonetheless, some reasons to be enthusiastic. Although Miami played with them for a half, they just couldn't get it over the line.
Yeah, I actually thought Baltimore looked pretty shaky early on. Miami's moving the ball offensively. They had to settle for a field goal on the first drive, which was big. Missed a field goal at the end of the first quarter. That was another long drive. But, Baltimore really in the second half, I think started to look more like the Ravens. 2 touchdown drives, couple short punts for Miami coming out of the half. And all of a sudden it's 28-6. Yeah, the Derrick Henry thing, very frustrating as somebody who had Keaton Mitchell over 13.5 rushing yards. He finished at 11. And it's like, do you need this, Derrick Henry? You've had like one of the greatest modern careers of any running back. Like, why do you need this random 100-yard game on a Thursday night against the Miami Dolphins? Like he got like an extra series and a half because he just couldn't pick up enough yards and then finally broke one. But yeah, I didn't come out of this necessarily thinking like, man, the Ravens are back, baby. It was kind of a reminder of like, all right, Miami's not very good. I don't know what happened against Atlanta. This is going to be a much tougher spot. And I think Lamar making it out of that game healthy, I thought they were pretty conservative with him early on. He ended up carrying the ball 5 times for 14 yards. A couple of those were unplanned. Looked a little skittish, took a couple of sacks in the first half. But making it out of that game healthy and then, presumably getting the full Lamar experience this week against Minnesota is big because I think going up against that defense the way they played last week, this is far from a gimme for the Ravens.
No, I agree. This is a huge game. The Steelers beating the Colts, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. That put more pressure on the Ravens. Ravens were feeling pretty good, seeing the Steelers lose 2 in a row and looking pretty bad defensively. Seeing the Steelers defense wake up all of a sudden, maintaining that distance between them and the Ravens, that was big. Puts the pressure on them to win every single week. So that's definitely going to be a fun, desperate game to watch. We're going to talk about that Steelers win over the Colts and what it means for both teams. But first, got a quick note here from our friends over at Chalkboard. You can cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players receive a free pick and 100% deposit match. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30-plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to claim your free pick and 100% deposit match now. All right, Nick. Got Steelers Colts. Big momentous game. Did the rewatch on this one yesterday. Fun. The Colts were looking like things were flowing for a while in this one. The TJ Watt strip sack was a huge play in this game. Shifted the momentum entirely. A lot of things still happened after that. The Colts had their chances all the way through. But the pass rush just woke up in this game, and it forced Daniel Jones into his worst game of the year.
Yeah, 6 turnovers for the Indianapolis Colts. Daniel Jones responsible for 5 of those. It was a very bad Daniel Jones game. At the same time, the pressure was just overwhelming and unrelenting. I thought throughout the entire game, the Colts offensive line has drawn rightfully a lot of praise this season and just, I thought really crumbled in this spot. Colts did what they do every week. They got to stop and scored a touchdown on their first drive. So you're thinking, here we go again. Josh Downs muffed a punt after the Steelers' second straight 3-and-out to begin the game, which didn't really end up hurting the Colts because Steelers go on downs after that. But in total, after that initial touchdown, muff punt, fumble, interception, punt, interception, and all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter trailing by 3 scores to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Colts still won the yardage battle, 368 to 225. They held Pittsburgh to 3.7 yards per play. It's just such a classic Mike Tomlin Steelers win. It was a lot like the New England game in some ways, where the Patriots looked like the better team the entire day, turned it over 5 times. Colts turned it over 6 times in this game. I mean, they had 4 turnovers on the entire year coming into this. I did not think this would be the spot for the Colts disaster game. Like, you knew some regression was coming at some point for this offense, but my goodness, man, it was just mistake after mistake. Hard to operate an offense, when Daniel Jones was under as much pressure as he was. And, Jonathan Taylor, the volume, it wasn't a total disaster, with the Colts trailing. He still carried 14 times, but Steelers did a really good job slowing him down as well.
Yeah, they did. And in fact, they talked a lot about that afterwards, saying they had to shut down the run so then they could let loose the pass rush. hey, that's a great in theory. Everybody says they need to do that, but they actually did it for once there. And the Colts went away from Taylor late too. He wasn't even in the game in a lot of those light drives. We saw a lot of Abdullah in there. This is just, I view this as okay, write this one off as a bad game for the Colts. I would worry about them facing other teams with good pass rushes. That's the one thing I might chalk up as, but I don't view the Colts as a fluke. I think they had a lot of things going right in that game too. I mean, they on that strip sack play, I mean, they had gone from their 2-yard line out to the Steelers 40, and they were driving. They're starting to, you could feel like the tension in the Pittsburgh crowd. They get another score there. Who knows what happens in this game? And they were getting, Alec Pierce involved early. They got Downs involved. Pittman looked like he almost got concussed at one point, came back into the game. Obviously, he took a really nasty hit at one point in time, but all in all, I still think the Colts are a really good team. And obviously now they trade for Sauce Gardner. I mean, that they're in it to win it, which I like to see. The other game I wanted to talk about in any sort of detail before we go to lightning round with you in your notebook is Packers. Packers losing at home to the Carolina Panthers. They lose Tucker Kraft in the process there for the season. Their most reliable pass catcher. The guy that it's kind of like how the Colts build around Tyler Warren is kind of how and the Cardinals go around Trey McBride is how the Packers were kind of starting to do with Tucker Kraft. He was getting into that sort of sphere we were talking about, and now he's done for the season.
I think that's the bigger loss than losing this game as a 13.5-point home favorite. I mean, this is the worst loss of the Matt LaFleur era. It's worse than the Browns game. The two,
I agree.
Ironically, the Packers have a tough schedule the rest of the way. It's one of the 5 toughest in the NFL, and you've lost your 2 gimme games. Home against the Panthers, at the Cleveland Browns. It's going to get interesting, especially if they lose to the Eagles this week. The Packers are by no means a lock to make the playoffs with how competitive that division is and the NFC is overall. But this was just one of those games that you can't write off. I think you look at the Colts and you're like, all right, the overall body of work outweighs what we saw. 6 turnovers. That's a little bit fluky. I mean, this was just kind of a microcosm of, I think, a lot of the issues that have been there for Green Bay this season and haven't hurt them because they've been able to execute in big spots. You think of that Arizona game. It's like they had to convert a 4th and medium just to have a chance to win that game. They were trailing at the half against Pittsburgh. They were trailing at the half again this week. Over and over, this team gets off to slow starts, and they take so long on offense. They can't get off the field on defense. Didn't force a single 3 and out in this game. They end up playing these games, Jeff, over and over, where they only have 7 or 8 possessions. They had 7 true possessions on Sunday, and when you turn it over on 2 of those, and let's say you punt on one other one, all of a sudden you're down to all right, we have 4 possessions. We absolutely need to score on all of these, and it puts so much pressure on this offense to convert every 3rd down and to continue moving the ball. For the most part, on a per play basis, they've been really efficient. All the numbers still say that. Defensively, the per play numbers look really good. They're 28th in opponent time per drive on defense. They're 31st in opponent plays per drive. Second fewest turnovers forced in the NFL. That's, I think, been an underrated thing for the Packers is they're not getting stops and they're not creating turnovers. So even bad teams like Carolina, in my opinion, are able to go on these long drives. And all of a sudden you look up and it's like, all right, the Packers have had the ball twice. There's 4 minutes left in the second quarter. How is this happening again?
Exactly. For a team that's, I think, is still really good. They're not a wagon. They don't roll over teams. I mean,
they play down the competition.
The game against the Lions in week 1 sticks out as an anomaly. It doesn't, or the second half of the Steelers game, but it's halves. It's never like a complete finish the drill sort of game for them. It's always like they put together good half here, good half there. They completely dominate the Bengals on the ground in the first half of that game against them, but they don't put them away. It's 10-0 at halftime. It's like that should be like 24-0. That's the way, with the level of domination yardage wise, they should be doing these things. And they don't do those things. They give the ball to Savion Williams for reasons. 4th and 8, they throw it up in the end zone. That should have been a big interception the other way in that game against Carolina. Carolina player, boxed it down. He was like, "What do I do with this thing here?" Yeah. I mean, they were lucky that wasn't a huge.
Maybe the worst dropped interception I've ever seen. I was like, I was like, wait, did he drop that on purpose for field position? I don't know what was going on there. That should have been another pick on the ledger.
It looked like there's just a vast sphere of this wide swath of grass to go run down after that too. I don't know what happened there, but
I'm downgrading the Packers, man. I am. I've been pretty pro Packers this season. I've talked to a lot of Packers fans, off of the ledge, when they're winning all these close games and they don't look that good. But like this was truly alarming. And losing Tucker Kraft he's irreplaceable, man. I know there's been some reports that they've been asking on Michael Mayer, on David Njoku. As we record this, we have a half hour until the deadline. Nothing is broke on that front.
Yeah,
it's just I think it's I don't know how you can believe in the scheme from Matt LaFleur. You kind of like Jordan Love after the game seemed pretty despondent. Like I think the team knows what they're capable of, and they're being coached like a team that doesn't have this level of talent. Like I don't understand this like shorten the game thing. It's like they play like they're an underdog or something. It's
exactly.
So weird.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Carolina's sitting there at 5-4 somehow, with some ugly, brutal losses, like getting blown out in their losses, and yet wins over Atlanta, wins, over Dallas, who considers themselves a contender, and now a win over the Packers. First time they've gone out on the road and had a good win too. So, meanwhile, and Rico Dowdle, I mean, he looks like legit. I mean, this Packers defense had been really strong against opposing running backs. Yeah. Dowdle scores twice, gets a lot of yardage per carry throughout the game. He looks the real deal to me.
Yeah, Packers defense was awful in this game. I mean, we're like a month removed from people saying like, well, have fun with Jeff Hafley because he's going to be a head coach next season. I haven't seen that very much these last couple of weeks. That defense was brutal, just zero pressure whatsoever. First game of Micah Parsons' career where he did not record a single pressure against a banged up Carolina Panthers offensive line that looked awful last week. They gave up 40 in that Bills game, and then the Packers come in and can't do anything. Worth noting the workload, of course. They told us Dowdle's going to be the guy. I thought we'd still see a little bit more Chuba Hubbard, but it was pretty much all Dowdle, 25-5 in terms of carries.
Yeah, exactly. And justifiably. I think credit to Canales for realizing the situation at hand. And zero people are talking about Carolina as a wild card, but they've got a better chance than some of the teams that fancy themselves as contenders right now. So, they could sneak in the division for that matter. It's not out of the question. It's unlikely. It's very unlikely, but hey, they're in the NFC South, which is the division you want to be in there if you want to take a chance and steal a spot there. But we'll wait and see. They're a home favorite this week against the Saints. 5.5. I didn't think I'd go into the season see them being favored by 5.5 against anyone. And now the Saints have traded away Rashid Shaheed. I'll ask you this: would you consider using Carolina as a survivor pick?
You might have to this week. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the board right now. I've used Detroit. They're 8.5 point road favorites. I've used who else is a big favorite? There really aren't that many.
There's no double-digit favorites as of
Seattle. Yeah, Seattle is probably where I'll go. They're home for Arizona. I'm not going to feel good about that.
No.
But there's something about like going out on the Panthers that would be really tough. Because like you said, like when they've looked bad, they've still looked really bad. Like the losses have been brutal for them. They have some impressive wins, especially this one against Green Bay. But I think they're like the Panthers' DNA is still in there deep down. Divisional game against the Saints. Like I don't know if removing Shaheed like makes the Saints that much worse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The point is I'm not in a good spot in my survivor league. I don't have the Buffalo Bills going up against Miami.
No. And in fact, I've got a league where we need a survivor pool where we need to pick two. I've used the Denver Broncos already.
Yep.
They're 9-point favorite there on Thursday night, but it's a division game. But a division game against a Raiders team that's trading away players. I've used Buffalo. I've used Detroit, I think. So yeah, I'm looking at that too. I think I have Detroit, but I've used Seattle. Point is,
I would go Detroit then.
Yeah. I think, but I have to use two. I have to pick two teams. And so I think Carolina is the other team I'm going to use. I might be going that route there, but man, they keep in mind, they squeaked out. They had to come back against Miami at home. They had to come back against Dallas. I mean, yes, they had a signature drive to finish off that game, but the point is they needed that drive. But I guess it's week 10. That's the point. If you're still alive in week 10, you're going to have some scary choices there, and you have to make the right scary choice. All right, before we get out of here, Nick, let's quickly what other highlights do you want to point out from week 9?
Yeah, I'll try to go quick through some of these games we didn't hit. I mean, we didn't talk about the worst defensive game of all time, in my opinion, which was Bears Bengals. I got some notes on this one.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I'm just gonna read them off here. One punt in the final 18 drives of the game, which is insane. The Bears had their most yards in any game since 1980. The Bengals, now the first team to allow at least 500 yards, at least 38 points, and create no takeaways in back-to-back games. They're the first team since 1966 to score 38 plus in back-to-back games and lose both of those games. Cincinnati, now the second worst defense by DVOA since 1978, and they haven't even played that tough of a schedule. So if you do the quick math on that, that's like 1,400 individual defenses over a 47-year span, and the Bengals are in like the bottom 0.1%. If you're wondering how bad this is, they also traded away like their defensive captain this week. It's not going to be getting any better.
No.
So that is still going to be the defense to target for fantasy purposes. Just a weird, frustrating game where I don't really recall a situation where an entire offense seems to be revolting against its own defense.
Yeah, the Chase Brown comment after the game, the finish the blanking game, that speaks volumes there. Jamar Chase kept his mouth shut, but you could tell he was ticked. I mean,
yeah.
And the thing is, the funny thing is about this is all the things that went badly for the Bengals, they still almost won this game. Not only was the defense, abysmal, just like utterly abysmal, they also had 3 turnovers, one of which was the Hail Mary at the end, but 2 other real turnovers and a missed field goal in this game.
They had 3 turnovers and a missed field goal in the fourth quarter, and we're still leading with like 30 seconds left.
Yeah. All it takes is a high school tackle from the safety, and you're down to your chances of winning the game are down to a Cairo Santos 52-yard field goal. I mean, that because it was around the 35-yard line, and Santos had badly missed from like 46 earlier, but of course the Bengals lined up offside on that play. So they got they go down to 4th and 1. They go for it, later get a touchdown. I mean, they had no confidence in their kicker whatsoever. But that's all they would have had time for, because they were out of timeouts. They have to run up the field, spike the ball. That's all they would have had time for. They were that close to winning that game.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention you get an onside kick,
that was bonkers
minutes as well.
And a kick return to start the game.
Right. Which like this one had it all. It had it all. Like you knew they were recovering that onside kick. It's like, of course, with how this game is going, they're going to get this. Other notes here, Falcons, Pats, not a whole lot in this one. I mean, Atlanta should have at least sent this game into overtime. Huge missed extra point at the end. A Drake May sack fumble that led to a touchdown before half is really what kept the Falcons hanging around. Drake London, insane game, 9 for 118, 3 touchdowns. Like every single play he made was a difficult catch, defender all over him, one-handed. Like he was awesome. No Ramondre Stevenson for the Pats. Saw more of Travion Henderson, 14 carries, 55 yards, 4 catches, 32 yards on 6 targets. Outsnapped Terrell Jennings 51-17. Jennings, though, was either targeted or carried on 12 of his 17 snaps. So we got our Henderson usage. It just didn't really result in the overall game that you would hope. Niners, Giants, not a whole lot here.
Before you go to that real quick, I got a comment there on Pats, and on the Pat side of things. They lost Kayshon Boutte in this game. Pop Douglas went for 100 yards, had a couple of really big plays, chunk plays. They're going up against the Bucs this week. Can I interest you in Pop Douglas this week as a pickup?
Yeah, I mean, if Boutie's out, I haven't seen on that quite yet. If he's out, then I think so. I mean, Tampa's been a pretty good defense against the pass, but a much better defense against the run. So I do think this is a volume spot for Drake May.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's low key one of the games I'm looking forward to this week. There's a lot of games I'm looking forward to this week.
It's a really good week.
Yeah, really good week. Hopefully it lives up to the billing. Okay. Niners, Giants.
Not much on this one. Christian McCaffrey volume game, as we expected, 28 carries, 106 yards, 5 catches, 67 yards through the air. Brian Robinson had a couple explosive runs. He goes 5 for 53 and a touchdown. The Tyrone Tracy bubble has burst already. 5 carries, 18 yards for him, 3 catches for 19 yards. Saw a lot of Singletary. Game script was a part of that. Giants marched down the field, touchdown on their opening drive to go up 7-0. After that, 3 and out, punt, 3 and out, 3 and out, missed field goal, made field goal, punt. And that missed field goal before the half was massive. That was a gift. There's like 30 seconds left on the clock. Mac Jones takes a terrible sack fumble. And once the Giants were unable to capitalize on that, you kind of just felt like this one was going to get away.
Yep. Titans, Chargers. This game turned on a goal line stand by the Chargers. I just did the rewatch of that one before their show this morning, and Tony Pollard was like this close to making it. He almost got in on that one there. And in fact, the broadcasters, I think, initially thought that he might have gotten in. It was razor thin close. And of course, the Chargers turn around and drive down the length of the field and score. They got work out of Jarrett Patterson in this game. He was out. He was actually running better than Kamani Vidal. I wouldn't read too much into it. I think it was just a one-off, just when he came into the game versus Vidal doing the hard work earlier. But just noting that the Chargers could use some help at running back more than anything.
Yeah, disappointing spot, certainly for Vidal. You figured they'd be playing with a big lead and there'd be a ton of volume. That wasn't really the case. I mean, they gave up a pick six immediately. Should be 2 weeks in a row that Justin Herbert has started with a pick six, and then a punt return as well for Tennessee. So honestly, good on the Chargers for winning this game, because this definitely could have gotten away from them, when you make two big mistakes like that. But the Titans are the Titans. We were reminded of that throughout the afternoon. Couple other notes here. I mean, Broncos Texans, this was just the ugly game that we expected it to be. Total dream for the under. Game starts with two long drives, one by each team, resulting in missed field goals. CJ Stroud, of course, knocked out in the second quarter. We had 9 possessions in the fourth quarter alone. This game had twice the number of possessions as Green Bay, Carolina, because both teams were just going like 3, 4 and out over and over. Houston was 3 of 17 on third downs. They were 0 of 3 converting touchdowns in the red zone. RJ Harvey got his fantasy points, only 2 carries for 5 yards, but 5 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. And then a big scramble on the final drive of the game by Bo Nix, picking up like 25 yards to end up setting up the game-winning field goal. But this was as ugly as we expected.
This was an eat your vegetables sort of rewatch for me. And in fact, I'm watching it, and there's like a minute 40 left. I'm like, okay, we're about to see the Knicks scramble. No, they get stuffed. They punted it away. I'm like, wait, what happened in this game? No, The Texans had like this immediate 3 and out to give the ball right back to the Broncos. Once CJ Stroud got hurt in this game, the offense, they had one good drive basically, but they had a lot of stall drives. A lot of, 5, they had 6 field goal attempts, made 5. Turns out that miss mattered is the very first drive for the Texans. But what really mattered is they had 5 offensive plays from the opposing 1 yard line, no touchdowns. They cannot get 1 yard. They just can't. They did this weird jet sweep with Nico Collins that ended up being a holding penalty, but it failed anyhow. It lost a yard, and it just they can't run the ball. Nick Chubb isn't even in there for these situations now. It's like British Brooks because why not? They'll never see it coming, especially the second time they saw it coming. It was so tough to watch them. Nick, what we haven't talked about at all? And I feel horrible about this. The game of the week, of the century, of the month, the Bills-Chiefs game.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Tyler Shuck.
Well, that was next.
We haven't hit on that yet either. I mean, Bills-Chiefs to me, I was on the Chiefs here. I got sucked into how well they've been playing. This is one that I think it clearly meant more to Buffalo. They've owned Kansas City in the regular season, at least for several years now. But a really, really strong defensive effort by the Buffalo Bills. I mean, everything Kansas City did in this game just looked difficult. They're being asked to convert these 3rd and longs. They converted like a 4th and 20 at one point because they just really couldn't give Patrick Mahomes time. Joey Bosa played maybe his best game in like 2 years, I thought, just giving a ton of trouble to that Chiefs O-line. Mahomes is constantly scrambling out. It was kind of like a Caleb Williams-y type of game for him by necessity, where he's just like constantly drifting to the sideline and just got to whip something up there. And, Buffalo being able to get pressure, but then still not really let up too many big plays, I thought was huge.
Yep.
Rashid Rice was basically shut down for like 2/3 of this game. Didn't really make much of an impact. Finished 4 for 80 on the day. Talked a little bit earlier about the Chiefs just needing a little more explosion in that running game. And then Buffalo coming up with a huge goal line stop before the half, holding Kansas City to a field goal. I thought was huge. Like that would have been big time momentum for the Chiefs. They're getting the ball back in the third quarter, which they did, and they immediately go 3 and out. They punt on their next drive as well. I mean, there was the door was open for Kansas City to take control of this game, and really for the first time in a while, we just saw that offense have no answers.
Yeah, Mahomes had no answer. The thing is, they played with a lot of 5 and 6 DBs, and yet still got pressure on Mahomes.
Yeah,
that was the thing. But Bosa, this is why they got Joey Bosa. He had a great game. This is what they need to see from him. Again, though, we've seen this in the regular season before. That's one thing we have seen before with the Bills figuring out something to do against the Chiefs. Chiefs make the countermeasure in the playoffs. We'll see what happens. Chiefs, though, I mean, they're 2 games out in the AFC West. That's the difference this time. Is they?
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they have 2 head-to-head games against said leader in the AFC West and the Broncos, but this is kind of an interesting spot here.
Yeah, I think KC will be fine. But sitting at 5-4, it limits your room for error. It limits your room for what if Patrick Mahomes twists his ankle and has to miss 2 games at some point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this giant cushion that the Chiefs have always had just isn't there. Still would be shocking, of course, if they didn't make the playoffs. They're still.
Yeah.
I know on Monday morning they were still the Super Bowl favorite at some books. They're plus 650 right now at DraftKings. Bills are 6-1. So nobody's really backing off the Chiefs. It was just a bad game, a bad time to play maybe their worst game of the year offensively. I mean, this is the first time in Mahomes' career that he completed under 50% of his passes. And then on the other side, you have Josh Allen having the most efficient passing game in Bills history. And the Bills still only won this game by 7, and the Chiefs had a chance at the end. It's kind of a no-win situation for Buffalo, where it's like, all right, great. You've now won 5 or 6 in a row over the Chiefs in the regular season. We'll see you in January and we'll see how that plays out.
Same thing with the Ravens too. Except the Ravens lost this time too. It's the only difference. Neither the Bills nor the Chiefs have made a trade as far as I know. Certainly not today. Nope. So still got about, at the time of us doing this podcast, about 20 minutes before the deadline's up there. But so we'll wait and see what happens. But I'm surprised we haven't seen any movement from the Bills. Adding a wide receiver, for instance, would be something. Although they have the worst cap situation in the NFL. So that it does make some sense to me as far as that goes.
Yeah. Well, you do wonder too. It's like, did this win over the Chiefs remove some of the desperation from this team? I would hope not, because I think you should still be looking to upgrade if you can. But yeah, one of those situations where it's easier said than done, I think, when you start to dig in on the numbers. But that's pretty much all I have here. I think the one thing I do want to mention is just that Kyle Monangai ran so well against Cincinnati. It is against Cincinnati. I think DeAndre Swift probably would have done the same thing if he was healthy. But we had already started to see Monangai creep in on that workload. Ben Johnson's talked about wanting to use 2 backs. Yeah. And I do worry about what that's going to look like for Swift, if he's back this week even. Like Monangai, I think, has to remain in the mix in a big way.
It's kind of a poor man's Gibbs Montgomery is the way I look at it.
Sure.
And there'll be some weeks where it's Swift, some weeks where it's Monangai. I think he's proven that he can be part of that equation there.
Yeah.
That is going to wrap up what we have for today. Everyone tuning in on the live stream, really do appreciate it. Of course, those who listen in on the download later on as well. Enjoy the rest of the trade deadline. Hopefully we get 10 shocking trades the second we sign off here. But good luck in your week 10. Nick and I will be back at you again, most likely next week on Tuesday. Take care.